Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August Salmon Orca Project Speaker Series. As we explore the Nez Perce Tribes project on the lamprey. We are thrilled to have you all here today as we explore the intersecting topic of the intersection of lamprey and the significant role they play in the ecosystem. Before we proceed, let us take a moment to honor and acknowledge the ancestral lands on which we stand. We recognize and pay respect to the indigenous peoples and tribal nations who have been stewards of these lands for generations. The Salmon Orca Project firmly believes in the power of collaboration and unity through this webinar series. We aim to foster a platform where tribal leaders and community members, experts, and stakeholders from various backgrounds can come together, share experiences, and work towards innovative and equitable solutions. Today, we bring from our Nez Perce Tribal Fisheries Department, Lamprey team leader Tod Sween, and fisheries technician who does the field coordination, Ray Ellenwood. And I would like to hand it over to Tod and Ray to give a brief introduction of themselves. Go ahead, Tod.
Okay, thank you, Angela. My name is Tod Sween with the Nez Perce Tribe Department of Fisheries Resources Management and the team lead for the Pacific Lamprey Translocation Initiative program, as well as Trout Ponds project leader. We kind of work double shift. I work out of the fisheries field office here in Orofino, Idaho, and have been at this lamprey recovery effort since 2006 and have seen lots of challenges, changes, and steady progress over these last 17 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tod. And I'll turn it over to you, Raymond. Raymond, I think you still have your mute button.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. My name is Raymond Ellenwood. I'm an enrolled member of the Nez Perce Tribe. My parents are Raymond Ellenwood Sr. and Bernadine Ellenwood. I've been working with the Lamprey Project for the past 10 years, I believe. Before that, I worked in the Fisheries Watershed Program, and before that, the Water Resources Program. But it's exciting to see the growth and the numbers rise of lamprey since we started. So, thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty. As we dive in here, for our listeners who might not be familiar, Ray, could you provide a brief overview of what lampreys are and their ecological importance, particularly in the context of the region you work in?
Sure. So Pacific lamprey often get mixed in with, I believe they're Atlantic lamprey on the East Coast, and those are invasive species that made their way into the Midwest. Pacific lamprey are specific to the West Coast, our region, Snake Basin, Columbia Basin, river systems. So what their purpose, what they do, they're just like salmon. They go out to the ocean. They spend what we're figuring anywhere from 5 to 7 years now in the ocean. They latch on to bottom feeding fish, anywhere from dolphins to and other fish too, like dolphins, sharks, anything like that they can latch on, and they take the little bit of nutrients from them. Then they'll detach once they reach a certain size, certain mass. Then they'll make their way back into a water system. They're not like salmon in the sense that they return back to the stream that they were born into. They'll return into any stream or tributary that has good habitat. So they'll make their way up the water system, like they come in for us. They come into the Columbia, they make their way up the Snake, and then back into the Clearwater and Snake Basin. And then they'll spawn. They'll make reds just like salmon do, and they'll die, and their bodies will go back into the system. So, and there's a lot of predators that will eat them, either live or kind of feast on them after they spawn and die, just like a salmon would. Bears, raccoons, eagles, ospreys, just everything that you could imagine out there. So as their numbers start to rise again, hopefully we'll see a return and see numbers rise of other species that would target them for prey. So that's kind of for, I guess, our region.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ray. Was there anything that you would like to add, Tod?
Ray covered it pretty much. And I just say kind of overall add that, they're real important to the ecological importance for a healthy, fully functional ecosystem. They're very important keystone species. Thank you.
Thank you.
Slides.
Speaking of that, Tod, lampreys do have some unique features compared to other aquatic species. Could you highlight a few of these distinctive traits that make lampreys stand out in the underwater world?
Sure. They're a fascinating creature, and there's many features. They're an ancient cartilaginous fish, somewhat akin to sharks and sturgeon, without bony skeleton. Compared to other fish, especially say salmon, they're weak swimmers, but good climbers, interestingly enough. They're kind of if you're familiar with the free solo climber, Alex Honnold, they're the climbers of the fish world. When they come to obstacles, that's often what they resort to, is actually climbing up and over them. And I would have never believed it unless I saw it. But as long as it's a wet surface like a rock, and in this picture you see them in this slide at Willamette Falls. This was taken from back in 1913. You can see just the masses of them that were there. They are also, as Ray alluded to, they're extremely rich. They're up to 5 times fattier and in caloric content than even salmon. And you know how rich salmon is. Basically, a lamprey is a swimming sausage. And like Ray said, just basically everything wants to eat them, from when they're little fish in the fresh water rearing up, amicetes or what we call macrothelmia, the larval and juvenile forms, all the way out into the ocean environment. Everything really wants to eat lamprey, including terrestrial species and such.
Thank you, Tod. Ray, many people might not know that lampreys are facing conservation challenges. Could you shed some light on why lamprey conservation matters and what threats they are currently facing in the areas you focus on?
Sure. So lamprey conservation, it's I guess they've been studied. The fish have been studied, but ever since the introduction of the dams, fish ladders were built, and those fish ladders were built for salmon, steelhead, fish like that. Lamprey really have a tough time making it through, and so that conservation really, wanting to bring them back is really for their own I guess diversity, because they're not too specific to one region. They can go out and come back to a river or stream in Oregon or Idaho or Washington, so that there's this great diversity in DNA. So trying to really conserve them means a lot for us, even in that we as Nez Perce people, and a lot of other tribes too, have stories about them, have um, um, just really things that relate to us as people. They teach us, how to be or how not to be, depending on how we see that, those stories or those legends. So it's really challenging though, because they're not seen on the same level as salmon. They're not something that you can catch on a hook and line. They're not a sport fish. So it's really tough to get um, agencies to buy in and say, okay, we really need and find importance in these fish, even though a lot of people know and recognize that to have a healthy sport fish like salmon, steelhead, it's very important to have a healthy lamprey population as well. Like we were saying earlier, they swim alongside, the juveniles. They move out alongside salmon juveniles in the spring and in those high waters. And so as they're making their way out, predators have a choice. They see an amiseed, a juvenile lamprey. They'll see an amiseed, and they'll see a smolt or whatever making its way out, and they know, well, that lamprey has a lot more nutrients, so I'll pick the lamprey. So it's kind of acts as a buffer. So that's kind of from a fisheries standpoint why it's really important for us to keep a good diverse stream. Not just wanting one or two certain kinds of fish. And then some of the and then it goes back to really getting everybody to see how important lamprey are, not just for human use, but for an ecosystem use.
Thank you, Ray. Tod, is there anything that you wanted to add about the conservation challenges of the lamprey?
Sure. In that, as Ray was saying, just the challenges they face, and one of from everything wanting to eat them, but one of the chief challenges to current challenges is the passage threats, which are the passage obstacles, the dams, and there's 8 of them between the ocean. The first one being Bonneville Dam, and then 8 of them all the way up here to near Lewiston and Clarkston, Lower Granite. And the unfortunate thing is with the passage, when they constructed the dams, they put in the fishways, the fish ladders, knowing that it was going to be effects on fish. But those fish ladders are designed for strong swimming fish like salmon, of which, as we mentioned, lamprey are not strong swimmers. And so at every dam, we lose 50% of the run. So an example there at Bonneville, there may be 100 approach Bonneville, but only 50 make it over and get to the next one in the series, the Dowels. And then by the third one, the next one, John Day, there's only 25 left. Well, you repeat that 8 times, and basically less than 1%, one fish will make it to up here, Lower Granite Dam, the portal into the Snake River Basin and the Nez Perce homelands. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. So as you guys are expressing, the lampreys are part of the complex river ecosystem. And in your introduction, I know that you mentioned this, but can you expand and explain their role in the relation to other species like the salmon and their contributions to maintaining a balanced aquatic environment, Ray?
That'd be Todd.
Oh, that's Todd. Sorry, Todd.
Okay, sure. Yeah, if you could advance the slide. You'll see in this next slide, the West Coast and the habitat, the range of the local range of the Pacific Lamprey. This is from a NatureServe ranking from back in 2017, and things haven't changed much, but it shows that the Pacific Lamprey destined for the Snake Basin, you can see up in our neck of the woods, it's only reds, scarlet, oranges, which you can see are basically all various iterations of extinction or extirpated. At best, they're the orange, which is critically imperiled. And so that's the reason the Nez Perce tribe decided to proactively jump on this and start the translocation project. So you can see from this map, they're basically classified as critically imperiled across the vast portion of their historic range. And even throughout the whole West Coast, you can only see just a few basins, sub-basins in green, which, are less critically rankings. So you can see our work is really cut out for us. And as I mentioned earlier, the mainstream passage, both upstream and downstream, are the most serious limiting factors for them. And when we talk about also like their role with other salmon and other aquatic species, Ray mentioned earlier how other species rely on lamprey in the freshwater river and stream habitats. The young salmon actually feed on the young lamprey, and then when they go out, and then other species out in the marine environment, the ocean, feed on them. When they come back up, the key thing is that the lamprey are bringing nutrients from the marine environment. It's called marine derived nutrients. And when they die, those nutrients, if they're not eaten by other animals, they decompose. And it's actually been found in studies that they make their way even into the plants and forest, the trees of the forest, through radioisotope studies, and that they've found these marine-derived nutrients throughout the ecosystem. So they're a critical key species to the environment. And so, yeah, and then one other key thing I'd like to mention is that one female lamprey can have up to 1 million eggs. And so, mention of the other species, especially fish, that's a lot of fish food, 1 million young fish. So they're very, very important to the ecosystem. Thanks.
Wow, that is really incredible. 1 million little fish. So it's it is really interesting to learn about what's going on with the lamprey and their background, and how the Nez Perce tribe and other organizations in lamprey conservation. Ray, how have local communities played a role in the preservation efforts, and what kind of impacts this collaboration has had?
So we've had a lot of involvement from other agencies. So there was, man, I feel like there's two other kind of major players in lamprey conservation. But it really, kind of putting all these heads together to kind of figure out solutions to how to bring those numbers back up so that this map that's shown can change, to more of the green and even yellow. It's we try to do outreach, we try to educate people. A lot of times we just get questions, as we're hauling. Everybody always assumes we're hauling salmon or trout or something, and so we get a chance to kind of speak on their importance. So kind of just reaching out to individuals, stuff like this. We'll speak to schools and classrooms, and really kind of trying to educate people so that they kind of have an understanding, an overall better understanding of, a healthy river, means a healthy ecosystem, and how everything is interconnected in that way. It isn't just, we're going out there to fish for salmon or steelhead. Kind of getting people to open their eyes and see that, if they can help push, for these species like salmon or like lamprey, it really helps, a lot of the people. So hopefully, we can get more involvement. Sometimes we'll have, Todd's been really good at getting volunteers from around the community. We've had groups come in, they'll take a tour of the hatch. When they take a tour of the hatchery, they really like to see the lamprey. So, we'll put them in a fish tank and kind of almost do a show and tell. So it's worked really good. I think a lot of the people that do get to kind of finally see that they're not this vampire fish that, is just out there killing fish. I think that's a big misconception, is that, they kill their host. So, they're, initially see it and even watching it swim looks like a snake. So, a lot of it's just that community education and all up and down. So we do, as we're, in the picture, when we're trucking them from down on the Columbia, we'll stop at gas stations and we'll check them, and people will just come up and ask, and they want to see them. So you kind of get these small moments of kind of teaching moments. And that's kind of been a big part of it, and hopefully being able to educate children so that they grow up with this idea of kind of more of a connectedness, not just for us and who, where we sit within everything, within our own ecosystem. We're trying to help them see that, everything matters and everything has a place.
Yeah, yesterday we were talking about some of those misconceptions, and in fact, I recently, as was preparing for this discussion today, I had to ask if the word eel and lamprey were interchangeable, and it got me to thinking about how I think some people also are curious about whether or not it's a leech. And so that it really is important to foster that education on what the lamprey is and how important it is. So I was thinking that maybe Todd might want to expand a little bit on what we were talking about yesterday with all of that, including the including how local communities are playing a role in these preservation efforts and these education efforts.
Okay, sure, Angela. Like Ray was mentioning, you know, the educational component, and again, trying to make sure folks, the default understanding when you hear, most people hear the word lamprey is, like Ray was saying, the Great Lakes experience in the Midwest with the invasive Atlantic sea lamprey coming through the Erie Canal and the St. Lawrence Seaway when those were constructed, getting from the Atlantic into the Great Lakes. And yeah, we need to educate and change that, and change that so people realize just how important and what a positive thing lamprey are here in the Pacific, on the Pacific, west of the Rockies. And coming down to even a local thing like you and I were talking about, Angela, the Asotin Creek. A lot of people don't even realize, but the name Asotin, the word Asotin, is derived from the Nimipu, the Nez Perce language, Heesu, and for eel or lamprey. And and they weren't even there when we started our work in 2006, 2007, the restoration. They were extirpated. They'd gone extinct in that drainage that they were named after. So I kiddingly, kind of tongue-in-cheek, say that one of my goals is to get the Asotin football team the emblem on the side of their helmets. What are they, the Panthers or Tigers? Get it changed to a lamprey, to an eel on the side of their helmets. But it's really intriguing work, and it's having impacts from local communities, all the way up to the entire Columbia drainage, as the Nez Perce program is producing a disproportionately large amount of young, producing lots of young that then benefit the entire Columbia River drainage. Because, like I say, the Snake River is such a prolific producer with all the good, pristine habitat located up here. So, and then just as far as this slide goes, that picture, that's our fish truck. That's Ray's home away from home. This time of year, he's traveling over 500 miles a week, going down to Bonneville Dam to collect those fish. That photo of the truck is on the Dalles Dam, and actually this photo here is of John Day Dam, and those are the three dams where CRITFIC, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, who we collaborate with, they have teams of crew that go out there and do the actual collections, and then we go down and pick them up. Thank you. One thing I want to add, answer real quick, is just that our translocation initiative, this program, a key concept is that what we're doing right now is still, though, just a stopgap measure to continue the presence of lamprey in the Snake River Basin until those needed mainstream passage issues, obstacles at the dams, we used to say were improved, but now we're saying no, they need to be fixed. They're completely remedied so that effective, what we call volitional migration, passage across the dams is restored. That's a key concept that I wanted to share, because right now we're still applying. This is just a Band-Aid while we await increased cooperation and efforts by all the action agencies in the federal government until real recovery can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you could, in regards to the Translocation initiative, if you could explain in simpler terms how this process of moving adult lamprey helps their population and what specific challenges you encounter during this process and what it looks like.
Sure. We, as we mentioned earlier, Ray picks them up, we truck them, let them hitchhike a ride around those 8 dams, where at each dam, again, 50% are lost, and just bring them up into the relatively pristine habitat of the Snake River Basin. I mean, some beautiful water, like the South Fork salmon, and up in Wallowa River in Northeast Oregon. Up here in the Clearwater, there's a lot of areas, Red River, Newsom Creek, South Fork, Clearwater, and let them do their thing, let them spawn. The challenges that we face, as Ray mentioned, was kind of the education of the lack of awareness and understanding of the importance of lamprey. Another challenge is funding. It's always, we really had to overcome a bad PR, public image, with, as you know, we were saying, just how lamprey are not a cute, cuddly, fuzzy panda bear. But as people start to understand these fascinating creatures, they begin to understand the urgency. That's another challenge, is getting the federal action agencies and get people to realize the urgency of the need for this effort. Because, yeah, basically up in the Snake River, they were on a path to extirpation or extinction. It's been a challenge, but I think we're really beginning to make a dent. Thank you.
Ray, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, it's really the whole process of translocation has kind of really evolved from just going down. We'd pick up one load in the winter when they dewater the fisheries, the ladders. We get one batch of fish. Those fish would be brought up, held in holding tanks like you see on the screen. They'd be overwintered, then picked, picking tributaries, like, all right, 50 here, 50 there, and now it's kind of evolved into where we went down and so what they do is they set tube traps, like a big PVC tube trap. One end they can go in, the other side's closed. You lower it into the fish ladder where they swim through. And they would, in looking for kind of security and looking for a place to hide, they would find these tube traps, go in, and then every morning, before we would check them. So it would be like me and Todd would go down, we'd spend the night, and we'd go to Bonneville, the Dalles, and then John Day, making our way up the system, checking these traps, emptying them, putting them in our fish truck, and then bringing them home or bringing them back up here. And then it kind of evolved. CritFic hired a crew of maybe 4 to 5, and then they would go out and actively check traps every morning. And then kind of we had holding tanks at the Dalles, and it to me, we were especially like right now in the month of August, you get high temperatures up in the 70s. The water would really start to warm up. And so we'd get morts, they were just sitting in warm water. And these tanks, you can see, they're really similar down there where their holding tanks are too, where they're sitting up in, could be 90-degree weather. So that water is just warming constantly. And, and it has water flushing through, and they have fresh river water. But, in our efforts to kind of better the situation, I had, as as somebody that went down, and I like to go down to Bonneville Dam, and they have these big holding ponds on their hatchery, kind of like this viewing station. And I, just seen they had so many raceways where they weren't utilizing them at the time. So I was like, man, can we utilize some of these raceways to put our fish in, knowing that they had cold, clean water to, to hold in. And then in further exploring it, I think Todd found the building that they're housed in now down there. So the Crit Fit crews, they start now, they reverse, they go out to John Day, the furthest from them from Portland, and then they'll start at John Day, check traps, then they'll go to the Dalles, then they'll go to Bonneville, and then they'll put all those fish they collect that day into this new holding building, the captive brood building, and it has nice clean cold water. So that evolution really now has helped, and it's more for the fish, and it's reduced the number of mortality, in holding. We're seeing kind of healthier, happier fish. They're just, they're just seem a lot stronger as we're putting them in the tank and we're bringing them back up here. So we're really trying to, make this process better. So now, I'll go down, spend a night, get up, and just pick up the fish now from this captive brood building on the Bonneville hatchery and drive them back. And it's made it way safer for the fish. It's made it the conditions a lot better. So there has been this kind of big change in how this process of translocation works. And along with us, the Yakimas and Umatillas do the same. They go down and pick up their fish. They don't have nearly as far of a ride as we do. Yakimas, I think, is like maybe 2.5 hours away. Umatillas maybe 3. So, but it's good. We used to, before, we'd on our trip back stop maybe every hour, check temperatures, DOs, really to make sure that those fish were always, in a healthy environment. And, like now, these past few weeks, it was really hot. A lot of times we have to put ice in just to cool the water down. We, even for a short time there, for a few years, we were stopping at it's a hatchery along Aragon hatchery. So they had cold, clean water, and we had kind of flush out some of the warmer water and replace it with cold water. And then we'd bring them back the rest of the way. And I was approximately halfway. So, we were able to kind of make their conditions a little bit better. But, right now, though, this is probably the best the fish have had it for the long trip back here anyways. So, yeah, that was kind of what I had to add. Thanks.
Yeah. So actually we have a few questions from the chat on the traveling. How do lamprey fare in truck transit versus a salmon?
So I haven't had a lot of experience with salmon, as far as moving salmon. But to me, they're able to cope with that trucking, because they get in, they'll suck to the side of the bucket. So we have these net buckets, and they're kind of enclosed. We put 20 in. They get really comfortable. They just settle in. They don't use a lot of oxygen. Whereas I guess we haul trout too, so trout are really, everything will spook them. Even just opening the lid, they'll spook, and they'll all just like run really fast. They'll try to escape from the light and everything. And they do a lot better than trout, and I believe salmon too. So yeah, they're really good in transport.
So if the Snake River is too hot or too warm in temperature, how are the lampreys surviving through transportation after being released?
I think lamprey are a little different than than salmon, whereas they kind of like that darkness. So they'll, when we release them, they'll go and find, they'll go to the bottom, you know, or they'll find, they tend to go to the bottom. They'll find these deeper, darker holes, and that way they can kind of elude predators, you know, whereas salmon will kind of swim within the water system, the water column, higher in the water column. So lamprey kind of have that natural, you know, they kind of want out of the light. They don't really want to be seen, knowing that they're prey. So they're kind of able to go lower where that water's cooler, compared to in the top layers where it's warmer.
Thank you. And then I'm going to so we're going to go back to the dams conversation. What is the current fish passage design for lamprey at the dams?
You want to take that, Todd, or you want me to?
Okay, well, yeah, I can. It's you know, as we talked previously, the fish ladders were designed for salmonids. So lamprey have a real difficult time. So we're working, it's part of our job. We work with the Army Corps and other agencies at the CritFic level, have regular meetings, design meetings, where we review different designs. One of the chief ones that came up with is the LAP system, the lamprey passage system, which is sort of like air conditioning duct or something you might see on a big box store, you know, like Home Depot or Costco. It's sheet metal and that, and they are pretty effective at moving fish over, but nowhere near the 90 to 95% target that we've shooting for lamprey passage. And just simple things like rounding the corners of the dams. When I say that, the passages, you know, whenever we make something, when the Corps builds something, it's, you know, the concrete, it's got sharp 90-degree angles with high water velocity on one end. And so as lamprey try to make their way around, they typically use a hold and burst method of swimming. They'll suck on to the surface and rest, and then they burst swim to the next. Well, as they work their way around that curve, they hit that high water velocity and they're swept away, swept back. And it's that really challenges them to where, again, only 50% ultimately make it over the dam. And that's what Ray and I are talking with other tribes in that CritFic to target those fish. That's probably a next step in our effort to target those fish that aren't making it over increasingly. And because there's just in Bonneville, half the fish are not even getting past Bonneville. So yeah, it's another challenge, and but we're actively working with the Army Corps to not just improve, but to fix these passage obstacles. Oh, and then another thing I might add, just this last year, 2022, we just started to address the other piece of the puzzle, which is the downstream passage. Up to now, we've pretty much talked adult upstream passage from the ocean to their spawning grounds, say here in the Snake River Basin. But the other part of the equation is getting those young ones after they've reared in the sands of the freshwater 5 to 7 years, or even 10 years in some colder areas. They have to migrate downstream to the ocean. And we just started the study now that they've developed what they call a JLAT, an acoustic tag for lamprey, and something that our predecessor who started this advocated for this work, Elmer Crow. I know 10 years ago, 15 years ago, him pounding his fist on the table saying, you know, we gotta we got to start studying this downstream. We got to start addressing that issue, because that's the other whole part of the puzzle, is getting back out to the ocean. So I hope that answered that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. And then I don't know if we wanted to go ahead and answer the last question before we get to our very last question on our series here. So I'm going to go ahead and answer this last one from our guests. What if any impact would be made for the lamprey if the Lower Snake River dams were to be breached? Would you prefer to answer that, Ray?
Oh, sure. So it would mean it would be big, you know, for if those Lower Snake dams came out. I think because, you know, so you have a dam that creates a pool behind it, upstream of it, and then you have a tail race that's out in front of it that releases the water. So like when we're talking about, so as those fish are making their way up, you can imagine every fish that finds its way from the ocean, or as a baby out to the ocean, becomes a young adult, makes their way back up. They have these senses that we have no idea of how heightened they are. Their senses, you know, that we probably know that they don't even have. You know what I mean? They're able to travel hundreds and thousands of miles and come back to the same area. You know, we have fish that we know that we had released previously that were translocation fish, spawned and then went out and come back into Snake Basin. So, you know, those fish, they're able to do that, what they're capable of, without GPS, or, you know, without any, you know, anything else other than their instincts to survive and to reproduce. You know, as they approach these dams, you got to imagine this grumble and this, you know, they'd come across waterfalls, you know, but they don't make the same sound a dam does. They have turbines and electricity, and, you know, there's sounds bouncing off the concrete. So they're probably either overstimulated and are confused and don't really know what to think of this dam that they're approaching, you know. And if they have 4 in the Lower Snake, you know, that's got to be really confusing to them. If they were removed, you know, you would remove such a big obstacle, and you'd produce a healthier, happier fish, you know, that would return, spawn, and go back out and do the same thing. So by removing these dams, you know, you're removing that tail race that's over oxygenated water. You know, it's super saturated with oxygen. You know, it's got different currents that are going different ways, and, you know, and then you got the forebay up in front of it, or behind the dam, I guess. And that's really slow moving water. It's confusing to fish. They kind of lose their direction and where they need to go. You know, they're used to swimming upstream, you know, so when you have stagnant, you know, sitting water, they're kind of like, you know, I imagine them looking around like, okay, now which way do I go, you know? So by removing these dams, it would mean these fish would return back into the Nez Perce country as even bigger fish. Because, you know, you imagine, you know, if you had to run a certain distance, you know, you would, you know, over time, you'd lose weight, you'd lose body mass. And if you imagine putting 4 mountains in front of you and saying, all right, well, now you don't have to run that distance, but you have to run over these mountains as well. So those fish would return bigger, stronger, you know, healthier. So we would get, you know, just a lot better fish. You know, they would be in a lot better condition than we see. And I think it'd go the same for salmon. You know, we'd get a lot better fish. And those behind those dams in the forebays, that's that still water. You have pike minnow, you have all these predators that are just waiting, and they're just sitting, bass that just sit and wait for those juvenile lamprey on their way out. They just sit and they just gobble them up, and then you have predators like sturgeon. Sturgeon love lamprey, and so I've talked to people that work at the dams, and they say they've seen where sturgeon will come right up to the ladder and chase them up, and they can hear them gulp, and as they're trying to chase them and get them. So you have these confined spaces where lamprey can make their way in, either to move their way up or move their way down. So you've kind of created, these dams have created kind of these little feeding pockets, these concentrated areas where they're able to pass, and so they're just feeding zones. So by removing those dams, I think not just, or I think it would allow the fish to move a lot more freely and in a normal way. They would, either down low within, the bottom, or over on a bank, but within, move out a little faster. They wouldn't have to hang out in these areas where they'd be preyed upon. So I think, to have the dams removed, it would take time, but it's been shown and proven that, I know there was the dam in Washington that was removed, and they immediately had lamprey right back in the system spawning. So, it would be very big to have the dams removed. So hopefully that changes soon, sometime in the near future, within our generation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. It is inspiring to hear about the progress that you've made saving lamprey, both of you. Ray, can you share some success stories or positive outcomes from your efforts, and what your hopes for the future in terms of lamprey conservation are?
Can I jump in real quick and just advance the slide, Angela? Next one.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, Ray, go ahead.
Okay. So, I think some of the successes is really educating or having lamprey, having Heesu back in our country, and even just being able to talk about them. So we get high school students that do their senior projects on lamprey. So they'll come up, they'll help us tag them or do the DNA clips. They get really hands-on. They write about them, they learn about them. And so to me, that is a success where, it's been decades since we've had a harvestable number of lamprey back in our area. So to me, it's not just about us, but it's more about lamprey. Once we can get those numbers back to a harvestable amount, we know that those numbers will be significant. They'll be in the thousands, not just the hundreds. So we have so much area to work with in the Nez Perce country. I think it's big that our children are reconnected with our elders that know and have harvested and have seen lamprey. We have kind of this, I know I have a disconnect from lamprey. My mom and my aunts, my grandmother would go and harvest, and they would come back and they'd laugh about, a lamprey latching onto somebody, because it feels so weird to have them, but just having those stories and having those times where you can have people go out and harvest would be the biggest success. And I think for me, that's my overall goal in doing this work, is really for lamprey, but then also so that we can reconnect back with those elders and with lamprey. You just, we have one place where we can go harvest currently, and that's Willamette Falls, and that's all the way down to Portland. It takes quite a bit of money. You need a boat. You need all these resources that a lot of us don't have. So it's really hard to have that connection, to keep that connection going. And I think for us to really claim success would be one day to have those harvestable numbers, to be in the 5,000 to 10,000 range of fish coming back over Lower Granite. But just to see some of the youth take on these projects and want to learn about them and find enough interest, to take on that task of, making it their senior project is really, to me, it's really rewarding, to see. So now they can talk about them, if anybody ever, questions them, they have something to speak on. So, to me, that's really part of the success story. Thank you.
I can definitely relate to everything that you're talking about. Feeling a family disconnect myself. Actually, just talking about this discussion today with my family at home, I also got to receive some stories about my grandfather and my father and harvesting lamprey. And so I thought it was really awesome that my brother could share a story with me about our family and how that goes. And because I didn't even know, I actually didn't know anything about lamprey before exploring this with you guys and getting to know you guys through the process of organizing for today. And so I really feel a lot more connected myself. I've learned a lot about the lamprey just as we've been discussing. And so, yeah, I definitely had a little bit of input myself on the topic of feeling disconnected from lamprey. As I was telling Todd yesterday, I've never eaten lamprey. And up until last night, I didn't know how it was harvested. And I think that is really important to explore with our high school students and educating the Nez Perce people who are disconnected just as we keep moving on. Did you have anything that you wanted to add, Todd?
Yeah, and just terms of, as we finish up here, the success stories. One is on this slide, Ray, they're releasing some adults. You can see with the old eel cans we used to use. I should have included a picture. Ray developed this new, that he referred to, again, the Ray buckets or net buckets that are just 5-gallon cans with a net, but make them much easier to handle. Anyway, and then the chart shows our collections. I should have included annual. It's not cumulative. That's just each year. And you can see as we started in 2007, it was only 178 during some winter salvage collections. By 2015, it was almost 400, 377. And now this year, the last couple of years, we're in the thousands. We collected this year 3,400 and counting. We still have a few more collections that Ray will be going down. Yeah, and then if you could advance the slide, Andrew, there's just a couple more. Just like we talked, Asotin Creek, that there's a stable, viable population in there, and so we've been able to restore that fish to its namesake, to a namesake creek, that was named after their presence. The increasing numbers that we just talked about across the dams, and then getting up into this country through translocation and volitionally. And as Ray mentioned, one of the Critfic tribes, the Umatilla, they've actually had a harvest in their homeland rivers and streams. So things are looking hopeful and looking up. We have increased cooperation with agencies. The feds have joined the tribal effort, states, local groups, but it's been the tribal leadership that really initiated this work. And then another thing I'd like to mention too is CritFix study by geneticist John Hess last year demonstrated the effectiveness, the efficacy of and success of the translocation effort using data, primarily Perce data, just where we take tissue samples and a process they call PBT, parental-based tagging, and every fish we handle, be it an adult for translocation or the young, the larval amicetes or juveniles, we take snips, and then they use a process, powerful genetic tools, that they can determine the pedigree, just like a racehorse or show dogs, which pairing, which spawning of which two adults, which male and female, produced which offspring. And like Ray was saying, we can track them. We collect them at the dams, unfortunately, as mortalities, as dead fish, but take a snip there and we can see it. It demonstrates where they are. And interestingly enough, Angela, our Snake River fish have been found up off the Bering Sea of Alaska. They've made it that far through this PBT tagging. And in that slide, you can see one of the larval amicetes, the brown one, looks kind of like an earthworm. And then the silvery macrothelmia, which means big eye, that's transformed. They also call it transformer with the eye, and you can see the gill slits. And they silver up just like a smolt when they begin their downstream passage. And then the last slide, again, I just wanted to pay tribute to Elmer Crow and the other elders, Herb Jackson and others, Melvin Joy, who really encouraged and advocated for lamprey and got this work going that Ray and I have the honor of continuing. And yeah, it's good to see some progress and success. So I really appreciate, and you giving us this opportunity to for some outreach and educational. You know, it's really very helpful in our task to have this platform to talk to people. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tod and Raymond. I'm really glad that you were able to join me today and sharing your valuable perspectives and expertise. Your contributions have deepened our understanding of lamprey and the importance of tribal culture with it. I would like to encourage everyone to stay connected and continue supporting our lamprey, and follow us on social media for updates and opportunities to engage further. And once again, Tod Sween and Raymond Ellenwood, thank you for your time and your insights and dedication to our lamprey project.
Well, thank you, Angela, and thank you to all the viewers and listeners for their interest, because it's going to take all of us to do our part.
Yeah, thank you, Angela.
Thank you. Let's see. And if you have any further questions, I know that we didn't actually get to all of the questions that came up in the chat. So if you still would like an opportunity to have some questions answered, you can email Tod at tods, T-O-D-S, at nestperce.org. Thank you so much. Let's see.